All right, great, welcome. It is 5:01, so I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance and the salute to the New Mexico flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Saludo la bandera del Estado de Nuevo México, la simbología de amistad perfecta entre culturas unidas.
We acknowledge that our Board of Education meeting is taking place on occupied indigenous land. We acknowledge the Tesuque Pueblo lands and other tribal lands on which we stand. We honor these people, past, present, and future. We acknowledge the history and ongoing colonization of where we are sitting right now in New Mexico and in our country. We acknowledge our own place in the story of colonization.
Thank you, and now we will move to approval of the agenda. Superintendent, is there anything we need to change on the agenda?
Good evening, Board President Anderson, members of the board. No changes tonight.
Okay, great. Is there a motion?
President Anderson, I move
Yes.
to approve the agenda.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And now we have executive session. Is there a motion?
I'll move that we go into executive session to discuss the purchase, acquisition, or disposal of real property, land donation agreement, threatened or pending litigation, Section 1015-1H, Rosengala et al. Versus Board of Education of SFPS, and threatened or pending litigation under NMSA 1978, Section 1015-1H7.
I will second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Excellent. We are moving into executive session. We will be back on or about 5:30.
Santa Fe Community College Foundation Board meeting from 3 to 5.
Oh, geez.
Tiger, did you get the wording for the motion?
No.
I don't mind doing it.
Okay.
Okay, real quick.
Wording for the motion.
Is there anything to dial out? Larry, is there anything to dial out? Okay. Pound 8. That's not it. You, okay. And why is it not giving me a data?
If you hit 8, you might get one.
There we go. That's it. Thanks. Hi. Great. Just 1 second. I'm going to put you on speaker. All right. Can you hear us?
Good timing, not been awesome.
I can, thank you very
Okay,
much.
great. Excellent. You are on. All right.
I mean, they partied more than me because I'm older. I've been there many times too.
What is- oh. Oh, right. Okay. All right, folks, apologies for the delay. We are now coming back from executive session. Is there a motion?
President Anderson?
Yes.
I move that we come out of executive session where we discussed the purchase, acquisition, and disposal of real property, threatened or pending litigation, 2 counts of threatened or pending litigation, and no action was taken.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Do we need a second?
Second.
Okay, great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. We will now move to introduction of the interpreter. Superintendent?
Thank you, Board President Anderson. With us tonight, making the introduction, is Deputy Superintendent Romero.
Para asistencia de traducción en español, el señor Morano te ayudará.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now we are moving into public forum. And just before I turn this over to the superintendent to turn it over to Mr. Janarski to read the rules, we have a lot going on with the budget tonight. And I want to make sure we give everyone a chance to speak. So we will be very clearly following the 3-minute limit. Mr. Janarski will give you a 30-second warning. So at the 30 seconds, if you could please wrap up your comments, because we won't be able to leave the mic on past 3 minutes. At 3 minutes, it will turn off. So just make sure that you wrap up your comments when that happens. If there are any additional comments that you don't get to, you can either, if they're printed, give them to Mr. Janarski and they'll get to the board, or you can email the public forum email, which is on the website on the Board of Education section. All right, Superintendent?
Thank you, Board President Anderson. Taking us through public forum tonight is our Public Information Officer, Mr. Cody Zanarski.
Good evening, Board President, members of the Board, Superintendent Chavez. There are 11 people signed up for public forum comment tonight. They are in person. There are no email submissions. Ground rules for public forum. Public forum includes online and or virtual participation as needed, as well as in-person comments when the board holds in-person meetings. Please listen and speak with respect. No uncivil conduct will be permitted. Please do not discuss any specific student who is not your own. There will be no sharing of time. Self-monitor and observe the 3-minute time limit. I will give you a 30-second warning when your time is almost up. Public commentary and dialogue are allowed only during the public forum, not throughout the meeting. Please search for answers on common ground. You may speak on any topic, whether it is on the agenda or not. Your input will be taken into consideration. Please be advised that the board may discuss your issue during the meeting, but by law, the board cannot take action on items that are not on the agenda. Please do not discuss employee matters which may result in disciplinary action. Instead, notify the employee's supervisor, the Human Resources Department, or the superintendent. Our first public forum speaker is Chris Montoya. Is it Chris or? You're not speaking? Okay. Laura Dieter? Okay. Jean Portis?
That's me, and I never applied for the forum.
The white sheet that was on the back table was signing up for public forum. No, I apologize. Sylvia Lee? Are you speaking? No? Okay. Owen Kunkel? Same? All right. Laura Gerdner? Speaking? Okay.
Great, thank you. And just to pop in, Mr. Janarski, please go ahead. If you could just state your name when you start and just your affiliation with Santa Fe Public Schools would be great. And welcome.
Okay, thank you. My name is Laura Gerdner. I have 4 children in the Santa Fe Public School system. And I just wanted to find out more tonight about the health class that our 7th and 8th graders are taking. My son took it last spring, and when I questioned the principal, he passed me on to our SEI, and when I asked them to provide a copy of the curriculum, they said that it was proprietary information and that they would not share it with anyone. And so I just wanted to ask how that health class is determined, if we have do we have a committee of people that determine what the health curriculum will be within our schools, what the content will be, and then how you determine the vendor that will provide that, and if somebody's overseeing that curriculum, and how we know what our students are seeing and how we can get a copy of that curriculum so us as parents can have conversations at home about that. And also, if we aren't allowed to have that, I would want to know why that's the case. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Patricia Stockton. And then as she's making her way up here, I just wanted to let the board know she did provide me with some materials that I'll provide to the superintendent after the meeting.
Great, thank you so much. Welcome.
Leave this here for you, and then I'll give you 30 seconds.
Good evening, Superintendent Larry Chavez, President Anderson, and board. I am a native Santa Fean, and I come here very concerned about the literature that is being presented to our children. I have made a copy for each one of you that is from this book, Norwegian Wood. In February of this year, we had an 8th grader who committed suicide. And in this book, it is very detailed and extensive of how to commit suicide. The other concern that I have is sexually explicit material, and you all have been provided a copy. I'm too embarrassed to read it. But in content, it is a sexual affair that happens between a 31-year-old school teacher and a 13-year-old student. It's explicit as to how the 13-year-old seduces the teacher. Now, according to what I know about law, this would be statutory rape. My concern is, maybe this book right here, would be acceptable in a college philosophical study, but for a 16-year-old, and this is being presented at Mandela, a 16-year-old, think about it. Their minds are forming, their hormones are raging. What are we presenting to our children? Education is supposed to be a healthy environment to equip them to be productive adults. Do you know that every 9 minutes, Child Protective Services substantiates a claim of child sexual abuse? 1 in 9 girls and 1 in 20 boys under the age of 18 experience sexual abuse or assault. 82% of all victims under 18 are female. My question is, where is the accountability? I know that NEA promotes teacher autonomy, but where is the responsibility and the accountability? Where does that lie? Is it with the board? Who substantiates this kind of literature being given to our children? That is my concern. Would anybody like to respond to my questions?
Just to be clear, the board, just part of the rules are that the board doesn't respond during public forum. So we'll just know that moving forward.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Judy Ross.
Okay. I think we can all agree that what our students are learning is of utmost importance. So learning is going to be the focus of my comments this evening. First, the reading list for students by grade is critical and should be the responsibility of the school board. I'm not sure whether it is or not. In the case that Patricia just spoke of, it was a teacher decision, not a board decision. So despite the teacher's best of intentions, they do not have the breadth of experience or grasp of the issues to recommend a book. It's too important to a child's development to leave it to the single source of a teacher. I remember when I read Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, what I learned about how victims become heroes still resonates with me. Heart of Darkness is on one of the 11th grade reading lists that I found on the internet. And as an aside, that would have been a much better recommendation than Murakami's book. In summary, for this first point, this is a highly educated and intelligent board. Please set in stone a policy that the creation of reading lists by grade is owned by the school board, and create the list with teacher input. Publishing this list would create the transparency that is critical to mutual trust and respect. This would allow parents to weigh in on the list and raise concerns before it shows up on their child's required reading list. Second, what does the student learn about suicide from Murakami's book? This book normalizes suicide by putting it on a level plane with life. Nietzsche would be cheering for such a nihilistic view. But this is not an appropriate takeaway for teens who struggle with suicidal ideations. Our students need hope, not unresolved hopelessness. The meaning of life and death is a valuable dialogue for a college philosophy or religion class, but it is totally unsuitable for weekend reading for a teen. Third, due to raging hormones, ubiquitous access to pornography, and cultural factors, teens are obsessed with sex. Murakami's book portrays a one-dimensional view of sex, and getting one dimension of any topic is not learning, it is proselytizing. Further, by New Mexico law, due to the ages of the participants, the sex would be considered criminal sexual conduct per Section 30-9-11. There is no critical thinking that can undo the book's explicit and implicit normalization of the unlawful sexual scene. In closing, book lists can be an emotional topic which provide even more impetus for the school board to create and manage these lists. Don't put the burden on the already overworked teachers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mary Jo Gallegos.
And just as a quick reminder, if when you come up to the mic, if you could just remind us of your name and then just make us aware of how you relate to the Santa Fe Public Schools would be great.
Okay, thank you. My name is Mary Jo Gallegos, and I teach Sunday school to many public school students throughout Santa Fe. According to the National Center for Educational Statistics in 2022, New Mexico students tested at or near the bottom nationally. We were lower than those in 48 states. And now I think we're number 50 at the bottom. Only 19% of New Mexico fourth grade students tested at or above proficiency in math, with 21% proficiency in reading. And while standardized test scores have declined nationally since the pandemic, in New Mexico, scores have consistently hovered at or near the bottom. And that is shameful. And my question to you is why? And I suspect that one reason is that teachers are spending far too much time trying to indoctrinate our children with critical race theory, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and with transgender ideology, and not spending enough time teaching them to read, to write, to think critically. They need math and science, those subjects which will help prepare them for trade schools or college so that they can become productive workers and earn a decent income and a good living and even thrive. And I think we need to learn from the state that is ranked number 1 for over 7 years, Florida. Under Governor DeSantis, Florida has prioritized education by ensuring that students were able to return to in-person instruction during COVID-19 pandemic and abolishing woke ideology from the classroom. Stop trying to sexualize our children. Stop reading pornographic and sexually explicit materials that have no place in our classrooms, and stop putting ideas of suicide in our children's mind. We want our children to be educated, not indoctrinated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lawrence Impresia. Yes.
I thought that was a sign-in sheet, but I'll go ahead and talk.
Okay, perfect. Did I get the last name right, or?
Yeah, well, Impresia.
Impresia, okay,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Welcome.
Lawrence Impresia. I'm a grandfather, and that's my interest in speaking to the school board. Thank you for having this hearing today. I just am concerned, like Mary Jo stole kind of part of my thunder. Since we have such a low-scoring students in New Mexico, and that's not to blame anybody. There's a lot of factors involved with the culture. Parents are also responsible for a lot of, what does or does not happen as far as their children's development. But I just feel that the main goal and emphasis for all of our schools should be teaching the kids. I think there's too much emphasis on a lot of these new social values that are being imposed. And New Mexico is not California. I think that we have a unique culture here. I think that is something that has to be considered when you develop curriculum. Curriculum that is pushing them in directions. I don't believe it's the school's role to transform culture or society and create certain values and push them in directions that possibly their parents don't want them to go into. If their parents do want them in that sort of thing, they can train them in various types of social behaviors. I don't condemn anybody or judge anybody for what they choose to do. But I think with a public school, it's supposed to serve everybody, and I think that the general direction should be helping those kids become successful members of society where they can go out and hold a job and do good for themselves. So essentially that is where I stand on it. I have very strong moral convictions as well, which have already been spoken of. But again, I just think that we need to realign and not continue to pursue those types of direction. And I would hope that you would consider our comments and our statements here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the last speaker signed up for public comment is Virgil Vigil.
Virgil Vigil, my grandchildren go to school here in the public school system.
Welcome.
Mine's real simple, real short. Madam President, board members, I ask you, what's the difference between this book here that you got a copy of, or pages of, and Playboy and Playgirl magazine? This book is in the school system. Playboy and Playgirls are not. Let me tell you what a couple of differences are. This book here tends to show kids how to perform sex acts. Okay, they do that. Then they leave the sex acts to the individual's mind, and they play that out in their mind. And what about Playboy? What Playboy and Playgirl, they show people in a nude situation. It doesn't leave anything to the mind. They can actually see it. Now, neither of these books should be in the school system. Why do you allow this book and not Playboy and Playgirl? Neither one should be in there. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that this book does not belong in the system. Not at all. And I want to say, and ask, we heard about the low school scores in our school system. Whose fault is it? Part of the blame is yours. Part of the blame is yours. Because you make decisions for our school system. And those decisions go down from you to the superintendent, down to the principals, down to the teachers. And the decisions that you make here govern the school system. And when you make poor decisions or you fail to make decisions, that affects our kids that are very important to us. And you all might have kids too, okay? And I'm sure you do. And we all love our kids, and we all want the best for our kids. So I ask of you to do a better job, be more involved. Let's be like the other states, like number one, Florida. We need you need to do that. And you can do it if you put your mind to it. And one 30 minutes, 30 seconds, one final thing. Madam Chair, Madam President, I asked for an exception to policy. I asked for a variance. Let these people know how each of you stand on this very important issue. I know your system doesn't allow you, but you have the authority, you have the power to make an exception to the policy. And that's what I ask you for.
And that concludes public forum.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you. All right. Thank you so much to everyone for coming. The superintendent's just let me know we have no union update. Does anyone have any board announcements and follow-up? All right. Yes, Dr. Gonzalez.
I was invited to Gonzalez School for an after-school program, 21st century program or something like that, because that school was named after my dad, and they're doing a project about it, so they wanted to know more about it, about him. And I took a picture with one of his C9 dogs, and and this was from 1940, and they wanted to know if the dog was still alive. Anyway, we had a lot of fun. They asked really good questions, and they're going to be showing their reports in May at the Higher Education Center, but it was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you, President Anderson. I don't know if the superintendent is going to cover this, but there were
3 teams from our district, 2 from El Dorado, and 1 from Amy Beal that advanced to the national level competition for National History Day. So that the students competed on Saturday in Albuquerque at the state competition, and there were over 200 students. So big congratulations to the SFPS students that will be going to Baltimore this summer for nationals.
Thank you so much. I will also throw in a board announcement and follow-up. I attended Nava Elementary's literacy fair a few weeks ago, and it was outstanding. The kids got free books, they played games, they got to spend time with their teachers and do interactive activities. And then I also wanted to praise Principal Hunter's Nava Kwando program that he's been running that was discussed in a newspaper article, the Santa Fe Reporter. It's been well over a month, but it's an excellent, innovative reading program, and my kids have really enjoyed getting their belts. They're almost to the brown belt, which is very exciting, but it's really been pushing our kids and their peers to read, which is excellent, and really innovative at a Title I school. All right, any other board announcements and follow-up? Okay, great. We'll move to superintendent announcements and follow-up. Superintendent?
Yes, thank you, Board President Anderson, members of the board. I will expand a little bit on that. That's my first announcement. So we did have students from Santa Fe Public Schools place first, second, and third in the 2024 New Mexico History Day contest at UNM. Students were from Amy Bill and also Edward Ortiz and El Dorado Community School. Again, with more than 200 middle and high school students from throughout New Mexico on Saturday. It was a wonderful event. We wanted to really congratulate them. Taking first place for group performance was 7th grade team from El Dorado, led by teachers Wendy Dove and Alicia Morrison, which presented 3 women breaking free from fashion norms. And the team did include one of our own, Macmillan Bose, Nara Martinez, Lauren Robbie, and Kate Smith. Also taking first place in the group website category was another 7th grade team from El Dorado, also led by Ms. Dove and Morrison, which presented Military Planes Changed the Way Wars Were Fought and Impacted the Years to Come. The team includes students Brennan Malum and Grayson Morrison. Taking second place for individual exhibit was 6th grade student Zenaya Kilpatrick from Amy Bill, led by teacher Malcolm Smith Carlisle. Also taking second place in group documentary category were Amy Bill's 6th grade students Aiden Martinez and Mateo Torres, led by Smith Carlisle for Revolutionary Acquisition. Taking third place for paper category was, again, from Amy Bill, 6th grade student Caitlin Adcock, led by Smith Carlisle for Pueblo Revolt of the 1680. Santa Fe Public Schools also earned top spots at the New Mexico Science and Engineering Fair at New Mexico Tech. Santa Fe Public School students showcased their passion and dedication at the prestigious New Mexico Science and Engineering Fair held on April 13th at New Mexico Tech. These budding scientists and engineers navigated through rigorous competitions at their school site, district, and regional fairs before finally earning their spot at the state level. We want to really congratulate them on that accomplishment as well. It's a great honor for them to present and win awards at New Mexico Tech. 2 Santa Fe High students took home honors at the New Mexico Youth and Government Model Legislature. Santa Fe High students who worked diligently for months drafting bills and practicing debating skills in preparation for this week's New Mexico Youth and Government Model Legislature at the state capitol joined 150 students from 11 schools that participate in a mock legislative session. Even though the students' bills were voted on or did not make it to the governor's desk, Santa Fe High took home 2 of the highest awards. Congratulations to Florian Strix earning the distinction of Best Representative and Landon Kessler named Best Senator. We also want to recognize our JROTC cadets performing and hard work pay off at the 2024 New Mexico Junior ROTC State Military Skills Meet. After preparing and practicing for over 7 months for this competition, students earned awards last weekend at the 2024 State Meet in Albuquerque. The awards earned this past weekend: 2nd individual male sprint, 3rd individual female standing power throw, 3rd individual kneeling sporter, first individual standing sporter, third individual overall sporter, third unarmed regulation, third unarmed exhibition, and first in uniform personnel inspection. In addition to that, as I sent the board, on the April issue of the School Administrator magazine from the School Superintendents Association focuses on sustainability and climate change with a special feature on Santa Fe Public Schools efforts found on page 18. This issue was disseminated to around 20,000 superintendents and administrators across the country. So again, I want to thank Mr. Gabriel Romero, who's in the audience, and our sustainability coordinator, Ms. Lucy Stanis, on this great accomplishment. And that does conclude my superintendent's announcements.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for the superintendent? I just have one, not related to your comments, but we talked about it earlier. If you could just give us a quick update on the school calendar and how that's rolling out with the 180 days.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. First and foremost, first day of school does not change. We are working through negotiations currently. As we start to near the end, we'll be able to announce and also release a 180-day calendar. As we mentioned during the study session, currently, state regulations has us, or our school calendars at 176 days. And we'll go through the presentation tonight, talk a little bit more about the details of the 180-day rule, what that looks like, implementations, and also what the calendar could potentially be released to resemble. Again, there's a lot of different moving pieces, but again, we're hoping over the next few weeks we can release the 180-day calendar, but currently we're still in negotiations because that does impact teacher contract, instructional hours and minutes, and the number of days.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Anything else from anyone else? Okay, great. Thank you, Superintendent. We will move toward our presentation. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Board President Anderson, members of the board. With me tonight is our CFO, Mr. Robert Martinez. We are going to give you an overview of the spring budget workshop. Also, as I mentioned earlier, what are some of the requirements of the 180-day rule, which is now in statute, and also some driving factors around how we are trying to look at our revenue for next school year, what are the implementation, and also what ESSER expenses we want to bring to your attention. Again, this is just an overview. It's not anything in depth or in detail. We plan on doing that at an upcoming study session so we can have a more organic conversation around the budget and the impacts for Santa Fe Public Schools. So starting us off tonight is Mr. Robert Martinez, our CFO. I will join him during the presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions at the conclusion.
Thank you, Superintendent Chavez. Madam President, members of the board, this year went by fast. Here we are again. So we'll go ahead and just get cranking through the presentation. So in looking at the fiscal year 25 budget timeline, January 29th through February 8th, we conducted the school site and department budget meetings. February 22nd, we had our finance subcommittee meeting. February through March is the release of the audit and the acceptance by the board. That was done at the first meeting in March. March 20th through the 22nd was the spring budget workshop. Tonight we're going to provide you with those spring budget workshop updates, which was a really a good session between the Public Education Department and also the New Mexico Association of School Business Officials. Through April and May will be the budget development and the presentation study session and the board meetings moving forward. And May 28th is the due date to the New Mexico Public Education Department for our budget submission. When we look at the New Mexico Association of School Business Officials conference updates, all school personnel will receive a 3% salary increase. There were no major changes to the 910B5, which is our SEG funding formula for the next year. That includes weights such as bilingual, membership, special education, fine arts, PE. And the PED will not approve the operating budget for any district providing fewer instructional hours to students in 24-25 school year than instructional hours provided to students in the 23-24 school year. Districts need to prioritize funds to functions most likely to improve student outcomes. Function 1000, which is the instructional function, 2100, which is the student support services function, and 2200, which is the instructional support services function. Negative or significantly low cash balances may result in requiring up to 5% of budget expenditures in emergency reserve. New Mexico Public Schools Insurance Authority, NMCIA, premium rate increases in the risk fund, nearly 31%, resulting in $1.3 million increase in FY25 for Santa Fe Public Schools.
And I just want to add to that, Mr. Martinez, this was really the average for every school district across the state. It was anywhere from about 29% to about 31%.
Thank you, Superintendent Chavez. The NMCIA increases employee benefits fund. Medical is 15.53%, dental 5%, and vision 3%. These are substantially large compared to previous year, which was 7.24%. And there were no increases to ERB, which is the retirement.
And with the increase to employee benefits, we'll go into detail during our study session. We've already been looking at numbers, what the cost is per employee group, what the raise looks like, and whether or not that raise will even cover it. So again, this will be covered in depth during our study session.
Correct. Thank you, Superintendent Chavez. So looking at the history of the unit value, the FY25 initial unit value was provided to the district, two districts, on March 22nd, 2024. And the unit value is $6,442.55, which was an increase of $288 from fiscal year 24 final unit value. It's an approximate increase of 3.22%. I provided this history to you all so you can see each year what the increase to the unit value is, because that really drives our funding. As you can see, in FY22, the increase was 5.16%, FY23 was 12%, and fiscal year 24, which is the year we're currently in, was 13%. So it's not much of a large increase. And not only do we have the initial unit value, but around February, we received the final unit value, which is any adjustment. I'll talk about it more in the next slide, but this year the final unit value did not change from the initial unit value. That's the first time that that has been the case while I've been at the district. So, we have some of these things to consider in the SCG, but specifically the unit value is a heavy driver, multiplying out the weights of the 910B5. When we look at the SCG adjustment, the state equalization guarantee, during the month of February, as I just mentioned, or after, the SCG may be adjusted for the following reason: final unit value, which remain the same, TCI audits, which is teacher cost index audits, National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, known as the NBCT, growth units, safe harmless units, new program memberships such as bilingual fine arts and K-12+. And in FY24, there was no adjustment to our final unit value, but we did receive an adjustment to the SCG based on the increase in National Board Certified Teachers, and the adjustment covers the stipend amount for those employees.
As we talk about current driving factors that really are heavily weighted as far as what revenue is going to look like for upcoming school years, we always know that our 40th day does not reflect accurately what the end of the school year looks like. Our 80th day and 120th day numbers are not validated at this point. Until they are validated, it would just be a projection of what revenue would look like. We are in discussions with the state of New Mexico to really try to expedite the validation of these numbers. And also, you average 80th day, 120th day to get your membership numbers that drive the revenue. Also, this revenue does include ridership. It looks like ridership has gone up in our school district, as we know, over many, many years. Ridership, or those students riding a bus, has been on the decline. And when that happens, you do see a reduced revenue for transportation. With our projections right now, and I said potential because we are still trying to validate ridership numbers, enrollment numbers, also our special ed drivers. At this point, we don't feel our special ed drivers, and that could be weights on ancillary staff, special ed services, are accurately reflecting what we have on our books. So we are continuing to take a look at whether or not those numbers truly reflect what we have in the school district. This school year's funding is based off of an average of 80th and 120th day for 10,946 students. And as you can see in that first bullet, 80th day was 10,786 students enrolled in Santa Fe Public Schools. But we did see an increase of about 70 students from 80th day to 120th day. So we are seeing, as you remember, over the last 5 or 6 years, declining numbers of students enrolled in Santa Fe Public Schools. We did spot this trend last year starting to flatline, and this does show us again that declining enrollment is starting to become flat here in Santa Fe Public Schools. Our goal is always to increase enrollment, but at least this is a starting point. We have to create a flat line before we can increase. FY24 initial unit value is 6,241. That gets multiplied over all of your driving factors. That is membership, ridership, so that's why that number is extremely important. What we're seeing, a projection for next year, a slight decrease of our teacher cost index, or TCI, from 1.097 to 1.093. Again, this is teacher level licensure, degrees, years of service. The higher number of employees that you have with a level 3 teaching license or a higher level degree increases that TCI. The reason why we keep pointing out all of these drivers, this is what generates revenue. It's not just purely based on the number of students enrolled. There are a lot of factors that go into it. That's why when we talk about that, how important that 910B5 is, that is inclusive of everything we're talking about. Membership to include enrollment, as I mentioned, special education, drivers, all of this is not validated at this point. So again, everything that we would have discussed tonight around SEG would have been a projection. We don't want to do that. We want to be able to provide you accurate numbers so when you guys are prepared or presented with a balanced budget, you have numbers that accurately reflect revenue. Now we get into the difference between House Bill 130, the 180-day rule by the Public Education Department, and what the requirements are. So in 2023, House Bill 130 required us to have 1,140 instructional hours, and this was an increase for elementary schools of about 30 hours of instruction. Within House Bill 130, up to 60 hours and up to 30 hours of instruction could be counted as professional development. Okay, this was House Bill 130 last academic year. What we've seen is, and we'll go into detail, it is still allowable, but it cannot be double counted. Under House Bill 130, and you'll hear this a lot, professional development was double counted. It was counted towards hours of instruction to meet 1140, but it was also counted towards the requirement of professional development hours for educators. This law also included K-12 plus factors in the funding formula, really trying to provide incentives to get above 180 days and 190 days. You exceed those two marks and you would receive additional fundings or additional weights. The rule change that was adopted in March 14th of 2024, and again, together with statute and rule requirement of 1,140 instructional hours, and here's the catch. It is now required to have a minimum of 100 instructional days, 180 instructional days. So there are two requirements that we have to meet now, the instructional hours and the number of days. If you remember, House Bill 130 was based off of instructional hours with no requirement of instructional days. The instructional days have really changed as well as far as how days are counted and how funding is generated. You must have a minimum of 5.5 hours of instruction, excluding lunch, to be counted as a full day. If you're trying to count half days, the number is reduced to 3.5 hours. Instructional days cannot exceed 7.5 hours. So there's a minimum, there's a maximum. What we found with our work is you must have 5.5 hours of instruction to be counted as a full day of instruction. So if you went down the path of providing half days, 3.5 hours of instruction, that would count as a half day towards the 180-day rule. That's why that new rule of 180 days is impacting the hours of instruction. We must include 1,140 instructional hours, some of which may be used as professional work hours. As we're starting to figure out calculations, if you have an early release day and it's only 3.5 hours, you add PD hours on the back end of that day, it is still counted as a half-day instruction, not a full-day instruction. And those PD hours are not counted towards K-12 plus units. So that's why we have been working with PED, asking clarifying questions so we can really figure out how many calendar days, instructional hours, and PD we will be working with our union on. We've been confused. I know you guys looked a little confused as I'm talking through this. We've met with the team and PED to really figure out exactly what is required of us. When I talked earlier about double counting professional development, last year you could count it as both instructional time and professional development. You have to pick which one you're going to count it as, instructional time or professional development. Whichever way you count it, you have to make up the opposite. So if you count it as professional development time, you have to make up instructional time. If you count it as instructional time, you have to make up professional development time. This is in the works. This is something that we are negotiating with our union. I think we're making great progress with our union partners, specifically with Union President Grace Mayer, so we are right in the middle of negotiations. This was another change. Currently, under House Bill 130, you cannot count parent-teacher conferences towards the minimum number of days. Now they are allowing you to use 2 parent-teacher conferences towards the minimum number of instructional days. The rule does allow for exemptions. However, you must hit growth targets set by the Public Education Department. Okay. We can include early release days, but as I mentioned earlier, you must still hit all the requirements as far as instructional time or professional development time. The data will be released in June to really take a look at what those eligibility requirements are and at whether or not you're going to be able to qualify for a waiver. Even though there are waivers for every school district, proficiency and growth criteria only allow you to ask for an exemption. Again, I say that, I want to repeat that, ask for an exemption. You know, we have not found that in state statute, so that is a memo that came out by the Public Education Department. We know our growth target, if I remember correctly, is 10% from where we end it, and so we know what our target could look like, right? Again, that data has not been validated. We're still waiting for a word back from, because we're currently right in the middle of end-of-year assessments, what that end-of-year assessment data is going to look like. Schools on 5-day calendars, which we're part of, 181 to 205 school days, and you can see what it would be a requirement for 4-day calendars. That's when you start generating K-12 plus units for additional revenue. And again, they capped professional work hours. We heard during this session and the previous session how important PD time was for educators. However, you can only generate revenue up to these marks, 60 for elementary and 30 for secondary. Anything above and beyond does not really generate revenue. So even though we've all advocated for investment in PD for our educators, it's not generating the revenue to cover the expenses of professional development. It is capped. I also want to mention, and we heard it very clearly at the spring budget workshop, the 180-day rule is unfunded. It's an unfunded mandate. Doesn't matter if you have to add 1 day, 5 days, 15 days, 25 days. There is no funding attached to the increased amount of instructional days that would be required of each and every district in the state of New Mexico. What is provided is a 3% mandatory raise. So again, we're working with our union partners to really take a look at what's required of Santa Fe Public Schools to hit our minimums, work with our professionals that are in the schools, providing boots on the ground service, and also make sure that we're investing and they know that they're valued. You can see, I'm not going to go into the calculations, but as you enter these different areas of 181 to 190, you see what the unit value could change, and then above 191, how that impacts revenue. Again, I think we're making great progress towards a teacher's contract, release of the 180-day calendar, and what the BOW schedule could look like. We did announce early on 24-25 calendar. We called it a flexible calendar because we did state once again the first day of school would not change. If we needed to get to 180 days, we could do that from within the meat of the calendar. Okay, so we wanted to make sure that the public knew the first day of school does not change. What are the requirements of 180 days? And this is just a kind of a summary. Instructional days have to increase, right? We can include 2 parent-teacher conferences. We currently are at 176 instructional days, potentially counting 2 parent-teacher conference days, which could just be an increase of 2 days. Again, that is not finalized because we are in negotiations, but again, that's the direction we're trending. We still, within that 180 days, have to meet the minimum number of 1,100 instructional hours. And as I mentioned again, depending on how you use your professional development hours, you use them towards days, can't be counted towards hours. If you use them towards hours, they cannot be counted towards days. Again, I underlined it. Start dates will not change. As you can see, the rule did allow us to use parent-teacher conferences as instructional days. House Bill 130 did not allow that. To your question, President Anderson, we're hoping to release and talk more about the 180-day calendar over the next few weeks. Wanted to bring this to your guys' attention as it rolls into the last slide, and we'll go into more detail in a deeper discussion during our study session. What are some of the ESSER expenses? I know this has been a question of our board, of some of our partners in the community, also some of our educators. Where we're at now, and I want to reassure everyone, we started planning a year and a half ago for the expiration of our federal stimulus, or what we call our ESSER funding. We do know a lot of districts are struggling to either absorb or take a look at what was some of the expenses they had in their federal stimulus. What you see here is what we feel are important to Santa Fe Public Schools. Some of them are creations from within ESSER. Some of them help fund unfunded mandates once again. But these are priorities you may want to consider. Attendance and truancy coaches, as we all know, they're very important. We have 5. They are not funded by the state of New Mexico, but they are funded from our federal stimulus. We have 1 community school coordinator that's funded through this revenue stream because that grant has expired. Student supported programs, that to me is extremely important. I would not want to ever reduce programming for our students. That includes Cooking with Kids, National Dance Institute, Community in Schools, things of that nature that are making a positive impact for our students. We do have a hearing officer. We are taking a look at whether or not that is something that we actually need and is sustainable for next school year, or whether or not that would be a responsibility of a staff member. That hearing officer does perform all hearings of student discipline that could be long-term suspended or placed at a different school site. Family and student engagement officer, a student data specialist that really supports our student data department, curriculum and instruction, does a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure our programs, and what I mean by programs, our software, it could be our student information system, our grading system, are talking to one another. We have started covering the exam fees for the IB exam and AP exams. An unfunded mandate by the state of New Mexico. We have a position, a new teacher mentor position that is funded through our federal stimulus. We did have a review of supporting new teachers by an outside group, and received an email from them today that they were very impressed and they wish districts across the nation provided the type of support we provide for our new teachers. So they were very, very impressed and wanted to help support us. Student travel, DECA hosts us some of these bands, some of these programs that usually have cost when they travel to state competitions. We did cover their expenses as well, travel expenses. CCTE courses, development materials and teachers. Support for our ELs, such as an instructional coach. And again, second year in a row, we have no bilingual vacancies.
Superintendent,
Yes,
just
yes.
to unpack college and career technical education courses and ELs as English language learners.
Correct. I'm sorry. Again, for second year in a row, we have no bilingual vacancies, and we actually have more bilingually endorsed or TESOL endorsed teachers than we have positions. And that was through our federal stimulus, helping them through the process of becoming endorsed. Our Native American Student Services, it's programming for them that we offered some financial assistance as some of the grants that they were used to receiving had expired and we were no longer eligible for that funding from the state of New Mexico. Our staff child care program was started through federal stimulus and is something that is still supported by our operational budget. We did add a restorative justice program coordinator for our middle school grade levels. We had one for the high school, we had one for the elementary, we added one for middle school. This is a way to provide support for our students. Restorative justice practices are not only something that we value, the state has now started to value it, and it is becoming a national trend. This really helps students understand their areas of concern, weaknesses, when they've gotten into fights or disagreements, bringing parties together, having them problem solve, and also be advocates for better behaved students and programs within our entire district. As I said, I covered that, and we can even go into more detail today or even at our next study session, but as board priorities, I wanted to bring that forward as a possibility. I have it under community and family engagement under that study session, just rolled into one. Of course, we know the importance of attendance. If students are not in school, it's very simple, they're not learning. We have to help educate also our parents. We see it in two groups. When you're trying to address attendance, you have to help educate the parents of our elementary students, and you have to educate the students at the secondary level. So we see it broken up into two areas. Attendance stipends for site level attendance teams. That is, includes counselors, teachers, other site level staff that want to provide guidance and be included in initiatives around attendance of their school. Student attendance incentives at site levels. Every school had a little flexibility to provide incentives for each site. We talked about district-wide community events such as movie nights and other things that we've gone out to really be a better community partner. Other areas of focus that you could consider, mental health. We know that's a big, big need. That is something that we're talking about each and every day. We've talked about the Santa Fe Foundation, budget and system improvements, continuing to improve our HR department, which I do want to recognize has continued to improve, and I think it has to do with retaining staff in that department. Recruitment and retention of staff, we know that's always an ongoing effort. I talk to you guys all the time. My concern with the commuters we have as employees and whether or not we're going to be able to keep them if a job is being offered where they live. And last but not least, always trying to improve our special ed department and services. I know that was a lot to cover. I know we said we'd go into detail and in depth in a study session, but we stand for questions. We appreciate your support of us as a district leadership, but the support that you give our employees.
Great, thank you, Superintendent and Mr. Martinez. Board, great, excellent. Board Member Noble.
Thank you, President Anderson, and thank you for letting me listen in over the phone at the beginning, so I didn't miss this. Let's see, lots of questions. Superintendent, do you know, even in sort of big round numbers, what is the ESSER, everything on that list, what's the aggregate, what's the number
Yeah, we're looking at anywhere from 2.3 to 2.8 million.
to make up in
To make
those
up, correct.
ESSER expenses? Okay. And if I understand, and I really appreciate this, and thank you very much. It's a nice overview to give us the sort of lay of the land before we dig into lots of particulars with the study session. And if I have followed the numbers correctly, we're looking at a year where we have, as Mr. Martinez pointed out, one of the smallest increases in the SEG in recent memory. We're also looking at the end of ESSER, which we have been preparing for and thinking about and talking with our legislative delegation about for years, at least a couple now. But the fact doesn't change that we still have this tiny SEG increase. We have ESSER going away.
Correct.
We have a mandate of a 3% raise, and every year that I've seen it, if there's a 3% increase in the SEG and a 3% raise mandated, it doesn't add up. We end up with a shortfall because of the way the units fall out, and all of that. So we're looking at a not good budget picture, if I read the tea leaves correctly in this information.
Board Member Noble, but before you jump in, there's also the NIMSIA increases that we want to throw in there
No
too.
question. Well,
Right?
yeah,
Just to
and all sorts of
tag along.
costs,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
NIMSIA is a big one and insurance is a big one across the board, but there's lots of increases of costs.
Yeah, and you will hear, and we've heard it all along, there was a 5% increase, and I'll try to walk you through the numbers of that 5% increase to the SEG. That came out to, and I'll keep numbers round, that came out to an increase of $200 million to the SEG. 96 million of that 200 goes to the 3% raises across the state, which leaves, if you can follow my math, hopefully I'm good at this, $104 million left over. PED is holding back $60 million in case of the K-12 plus units, which now leaves us with $44 million left over. Of that $44 million, it's broken up into buckets already. CTE, teacher mentorship, special ed programming, instructional materials, you name it, it's broken up. So the increase of 5% to the SEG is true. However, the increase that we're going to see in the SEG comes out to 3.22%.
I see.
And so there's a 2% that is being held back that is really impacting districts across the state.
And that is in case of the K-12 units coming up.
Correct.
On top of that, we have this incredible complexity. It's like a kaleidoscope of complexity for instructional hours that are required, as well as instructional days, and planning the calendar. And I know you and your team have been on this for a long, long time, and we're still trying to get clarification and are not able to say with ultimate clarity what our calendar looks like quite yet. So we add up the complexity, and I guess I just want to be clear that administrative complexity does add to costs. This is not a cost neutral factor. So we have incredible administrative complexity. We have not enough money in the unit value to really cover what's needed. We have ESSER funds going away, and ultimately what we are facing for the reality on the ground in schools is pandemic recovery, behavioral and mental wellness issues that are still being unwound, which are also costing lots of money for our operational reality. And then in Santa Fe, we have special factors. I mean, there's lots of these factors in lots of places, but increasing housing costs, which make it very difficult to retain staff with commutes and all of this. And so in the end, it looks to me, as of today, and I hope it'll change, and maybe they'll release some of that $60 million into the unit value or something, because that would help districts a lot. But this is a very difficult budget environment for this district and probably every other in the state.
And I think to your point, I've been with the district 7 years at the district level. I want to say this has been the most difficult year to figure out what your budget's going to look like, what the school calendar is going to look like, and meet all the requirements. Almost feels like it's a moving target, to be quite honest. There's a lot of information that we have to digest in order to be successful in negotiations and be transparent with our union partners. But at the same time, we have a deadline of the end of May to be able to submit a balanced budget with all these factors that you mentioned. But I do want to recognize the team is doing an amazing job of digesting information, asking questions, trying to build a well-balanced budget and taking care of our students. And that's why I kept saying programming to students and our staff members.
Yeah, and then there's the increasing costs, which...
Yes.
Well, thank you for this. I appreciate the clarity. It doesn't fill me with joy about doing this year's budget, but I do appreciate that you and your team have been looking at it, have been on it, have been making plans and looking at different options. And I know it's a great deal of work, and we have yet to dig in and finish the budget.
Correct.
But I appreciate the clarity here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Noble. Other board members? Okay, I've got a lot. What she said, exactly. I mean, part of what I'm going to say is just going to be what she said. Okay, so I mean, this is sort of echoing what Board Member Noble said, and it's not necessarily question. It is kind of. So in previous years, the increase in the employee benefits has been about 7.5 on medical. Is that right? Or 7.2 in medical?
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, last year it was 7.2 for all.
For all of it, okay. And it's previously been a board priority that we cover the increase in that benefit cost so that we don't see a decrease in the pay of our employees, right?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So let me explain the coverage in
Okay.
benefits. If you're making $50,000 or less, it's an 80-20 split, and that is what is funded by the state of New Mexico. Employees who make over $50,000, we are funded for a 60-40 split. However, the board has been very gracious in the previous years it's a 74-26 split that we've held strong with for the last few years. So even though there's an increase, and we are running numbers with employee groups to make sure that the increase in benefits are covered by the 3%, and also that they would see larger take-home. Now, the take-home is going to vary because of the different pay levels, but the 74-26 split is probably one of the best benefits for working for Santa Fe Public Schools. We've talked to other districts around the state. They're still stuck at 60-40. We do recommend, and we can talk about that in the study session, that we remain at 74-26.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that's something to dig into in the study session, but I'll be interested to see kind of how that shakes out with the numbers. Okay, let's see. For K-12 plus, are we going to be eligible for any of that funding? I mean, my guess is the answer is no with our summer programming as we have it now.
Summer
No.
programming is not. It's completely separate.
Okay. All right. On page 5, I just had a question about what something is, about a definition. What are save harmless units?
So the save harmless units, from they're from like previous year, if you were had held harmless
Okay,
funding,
right.
those types of things before the pandemic, you know, and even after.
Okay.
So the district never had any hold harmless funding.
So if you
Right.
remember during the pandemic and as we exited, they held our funding harmless. They didn't penalize us for low ridership,
Right.
for declining enrollment. However, now that is no longer the issue. But that, if you remember a few years back, everybody was held harmless with those type of units.
Great. Okay, and then I have questions on professional development. Because I don't even know if the questions are going to make total sense because I'm still kind of wrapping my head around the hours versus the days versus what do we count for professional development. Okay, so we are going to need to add additional professional development. No, we are
No.
not going to have to add
No.
additional professional development.
What we
Okay.
have to add that we know of
Okay.
is 2 days of instruction
Okay, just 2 days of instruction.
at this point. Again, we won't make that official announcement till we start to conclude negotiations.
Okay. That kind of renders my next question moot, but I guess just in case it ends
Sure.
up happening. So we can't double count professional development for hours and for days. So if we did increase PD and we weren't counting it towards our hours,
You have to
Would it-
increase instructional time.
you have to increase instructional time, so then we wouldn't be able to go back on that for next year. We'd have to be stuck in that increased instructional time.
Yeah, great question. So whenever you increase the number of instructional hours, that is your new minimum for next year.
Okay.
Every time you increase instructional time, that sets the new minimum for your school district moving forward.
Okay. Got it. For our ESSER expenses, if we're not able to fund these from is it the operating or the operational?
Operational.
Operational. That's what I wrote first, and then I wrote down operating. Does that mean we're potentially looking at cutting staff?
And that's a great question for the study session.
Okay, got it.
But short answer, I think we are able to absorb,
Okay,
if not almost.
great. And I just wanted to call out the new teacher mentor. As not a professional educator, I think mentoring new teachers seems like it will really help increase their quality of instruction. So that would be important to me that we.
Well, that's why that position plus the PD is so important. That's what builds capacity. That's what builds knowledge of their content that they're providing to our students. So for us, we feel professional development is as important as anything else.
Yeah, I mean, that's more than the days. Quality of instruction is what's going to get us to better proficiency and better prepared students for out in the world. And we can all say that till we're blue in the face. And then I have stuff to talk about on board priorities, but we can do that later in the meeting.
Okay.
I just want to say that I really appreciate, this is great to have this overview as we move into the budget, and I look forward to the study session.
Absolutely.
And if I may, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez, as Superintendent Chavez mentioned, this is like budgeting at a moving target, and it is every year. It just becomes more complex. I will say, which we'll dive into at the study session, the district did a really well job between the board, the superintendent, the leadership last year, or for this year, of building a really sustainable and well-balanced budget to where there are other indicators that are not going to set us back next year, like this fiscal year, such as having to budget cash. There's things that we'll dive into at that level, but the budget this year is really sustainable and has put us in a much better position to meet these priorities and these ESSER initiatives.
Great, thank you so much. All right, and another thank you to Board Member Noble for bringing up all of that very clear, stark picture of what we are working with, and the amount of effort that's gone into this is also reflected in that admin cost, so thank you for bringing that up too. All right, so now we can move into our action items. We'll move first to the consent agenda. Is there anything anyone wants to pull off of the consent agenda? Okay, is there a motion?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. So now we will move to item B, the land donation agreement. Am I sending that to you, Superintendent?
You sure can.
Great.
So with us tonight, taking us through the land donation agreement is our Executive Director of Operations, Mr. Gabe Romero. Mr. Romero.
Good evening, Board President Anderson, board members, Superintendent. What we're here this evening to look at and hopefully approve is a land donation agreement that began back in September of 2021 with the resolution to approve a land donation in the area of Richards Avenue and Governor Miles Road. Since that time, myself, our legal contract staff have worked diligently with representatives of the Beatty property to come to an agreement on a land donation agreement that's brought before you today and is within the packet. If there's more to that, I would be able to stand for questions.
Do you have questions? If there are no questions, I'm ready with motion. Okay. I move that we accept the land donation agreement as outlined and additionally grant authority to the superintendent and the board president to allow for any extension necessary for the closing on that agreement.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or otherwise? Excellent. That has passed. All right, now we will move to item C. Superintendent?
Thank you, Board President Anderson, members of the board. Making the introduction tonight is our CFO, Mr. Robert Martinez. Mr. Martinez.
Thank you, Superintendent Chavez. Madam President, members of the board. Tonight we have Arthur Melendres, Art Melendres with Module, Sperling. And he is going to walk us through two resolutions. The first resolution is the General Obligation School Bonds Series 2024 in the amount of $28 million for erecting, remodeling. My eyes are not that great, I'm sorry. Making addition, furnishing school buildings, and improving school grounds. And I think he might have stepped out just at this moment.
Restroom break. Well, with that, again, this is an exercise that we go through whenever we're trying to move forward with our GeoBond series. The amount is for $28 million. And again, this is something that we've talked about. I know many of you on the CRC have discussed, even though, and again, I want to first say we're very grateful and thankful to our voters. They are the ones that go out and approve these bonds. But in addition to that, increased cost to construction is now projected to be over $500 a square foot. So when you look at $28 million, it does not cover the cost it once did. And so when we're talking about building and erecting, we have to remember that per square foot has increased as well.
If I may.
Please. Sorry, Board Member Noble.
As long as we're talking about things. It's nice to see, and in our consent agenda, there are millions. I can't quite do the math of all the GeoBond funding, but there's also mill levy funding that's being approved in terms of what things that we will improve across the district, including turf fields at Atalaya, Cesar Chavez Piñon, Sweeney, and Capitol High School. This is also, local stimulus when we spend this money and do these projects. Not only do we get better facilities at our school for our students and the families that inhabit them, having just been at one, but we get the economic benefit in our community. So this is important stuff, and as you stated, Superintendent, our community makes it possible, and because it's about summer building season, I guess we're ramping up.
And part of that, if I can add, There had been requests for many, many years, and Vice President Abeta knows this, especially for our Southside schools, really adding turf fields. Again, as we talk about sustainability and also lowering cost across utilities, these turf fields do that for us. It provides a safe environment for our students, but also for our community, because they always ask for space and use of our fields. So with this, you don't have to water, you don't have to mow and cut. And we were recognized, as you all know, a month or two ago for our sustainability efforts, and this just continues down that path.
You also don't break your ankle in prairie dog bowls.
Oh yeah, do you
anyway.
remember that graduation? Yes, we were all hanging on to one another.
Glad I was wearing flats.
Yes.
While we're talking, I'll go back to the contracts and just say that I am particularly excited about what we approved for the construction of the transportation buildings.
Yes.
I know that our folks have been dealing with substandard facilities for a long time, so that's just another benefit of the GO bond. We were able to see renderings of that, and it looks like it's going to be particularly great. And it's important for our staff members to have
Correct.
facilities that
Well,
they can work in.
And I think sometimes some departments get overlooked, right? Transportation has been one of those. I see their buses and their facilities no different than a classroom or a school building. You know, as we start to continue to electrify our fleet, you know, is very simply put at the National School Boards Association, it helps with classroom management on the buses. It provides a safer environment for our students and our drivers. One thing that was discussed is that when you're in a electric vehicle that is a lot quieter than one of the diesel or propane buses, they can hear the traffic around them. They can hear the cars next to them. So again, it's really about providing a safe and clean environment. And so as you mentioned, transportation is being built out. We want to thank the CRC for all of that work. And we'll continue to move forward with being sustainable as a district, but also moving forward with providing a safe environment for students, but the community, right? And we talk about those turf fields. And I know board member, well, all the board members, you guys get reached out by, I was thinking about each one of you as I was trying to name you, but each one of you get reached out for access to facilities. So again, as we continue to improve our facilities, you know, it gives our community a place for them to use as well.
Madam President, Superintendent Chavez, and board members. So Mr. Melendres actually drove off because he saw that the resolutions were under consent. So when you all approved consent, he thought that the resolutions were approved. I have him on speakerphone if you'd like for me to put him on speaker on the mic, or if you would like for him to turn around.
No, we would not like for him to turn around. You can put him on speaker.
Okay.
Good Lord, absolutely not.
As long as he's being safe, we don't want him,
Doesn't really
Drive-
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have questions.
Do any of us have questions? No, there are no questions. So do we have a motion on this resolution?
I move for approval of resolution 2023-2024-6, the notice of sale for GO 2024.
I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent, so that has passed.
Great discussion.
Great, and we'll move into our next resolution, which I think the same thing will happen, but do we need to discuss? Does anyone want to just give us a brief
I
overview
can
of
read
what
the
it is?
summary of
Great.
the resolution
Thanks.
real quick. This one is for the resolution determining the necessity for entering into a lease purchase agreement and notes to acquire the ETN, the educational technology equipment. The ETN, Act is to lease up to 11 million of certain education technology equipment, estimate of cost, statement for source of funds for payments, estimated tax rate, and directing district's financial advisor and bond counsel to prepare a lease purchase agreement and a note for the district's acquisition to facilitate the technology master plan of the district.
Okay, we've also done this before, so are there any questions? And if not, I'll make a motion. Okay, I move approval.
I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or otherwise? Okay, so now we will move to our next
Thank you.
resolution. Superintendent.
Thank you, Board President Anderson, members of the board. This was a long time coming, and I know our partners are in the audience. This was a lot of work between the district and the public education department. This is a proposal for brain education. It was advertised in the New Mexican. One proposal was received. That proposal is in your packet. What I want to talk about is what's going to happen. It's going to be the brain education group working with a handful of our schools, and I hope I got them all right, but Chaparral, Tesuque, Atalaya, Piñon, and Nava. What they do is provide some mind and body training. So as we talk about mental health and we talk about mental health and we talk about just the physical health of our students, they help develop the brains, the physical, emotional, mental health of our students. They will come to the classrooms and they'll lead physical exercising, breathing techniques, and other areas of concern that they can help us address. So again, this is something that we worked on, and I don't know how many months it's been since we started our conversation. I first met with you guys, but we present this for approval, and we can start the process of working with our partner.
Yes, board member Bozé.
Thank you, President Anderson. I was just wondering if we could review that scoring rubric. And I know we usually see these when we send an RFP out, and there's oftentimes comparisons. Obviously, if there's nobody else that does this sort of work, there's not much to compare. But I just would love to talk a little bit more about this.
Sure, absolutely. And this was the only proposal we received. There's not many groups in the state of New Mexico I found doing this type of work. But again, the criteria was experience, reliability, of course fees, bilingualism, and then supervision. When you start going through the criteria, it is scored, and that's how it's determined on whether or not a certain proposal would be presented to the Board of Education on approval. So again, this is a new area for us as a school district, but also for the state of New Mexico. This is a pilot program. This was funded through junior money, if I remember correctly. And this is something that could be replicated and modeled throughout the state of New Mexico, depending on the outcomes.
Thank you. So this, it says cost implication pending negotiation of contract. That will be funded through junior money?
It is.
Okay.
It's an allocated amount by the state of New Mexico. This is not something from our budget. This is not something that we're generating. This is something that we advocated for, and something that we think could be beneficial to our students.
Okay. Is there, just on that last point there, are there plans or discussion in the future about expanding to cover bilingual students or those with limited English proficiency?
And that's something that we'll review with our partner at the conclusion of this pilot. Again, this is a pilot program. This is something that has not been developed across the state of New Mexico. If we do see successful results, I'm sure more bilingual programming will be provided. Also, we're hoping there would be additional funding for it, because this is one-time revenue. And this is a one-time pilot project to see if this is going to make a difference in our students' lives.
Since you brought it up, what do successful outcomes look like, and how will those be measured?
That's a good question. We would have to work with our partners on Matrix for that.
So from here, we'll get a contract before approval, and we
You'll-
can ask some more questions at that time.
And with the partner, with the approval of this, we can always bring our partners, and I think this could be a study session with our student wellness department and in conjunction with our brain education partners. I think one study session on just the well-being of staff and students.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else from anyone? Okay, is there a motion?
I move approval of the brain education contract to move forward with the brain education related services.
Is there a second?
I'll second with the just small correction that it's not the contract yet, it's the proposal.
Proposal.
Okay, great. All right, everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or otherwise? Okay, now we move into our board discussion and possible action. So first, we'll talk about board priorities. And I appreciate the superintendent including those as the last page in our presentation, and for pulling those out of what we talked about, the evaluation that you were comfortable with talking about. So does anyone want to start talking about board priorities?
And before we,
Yes,
may
absolutely.
I'm sorry.
Please.
Again, this could be something that is just discussed broadly, and you
Yeah.
could bring more specific items to the study session.
Okay.
Again, you can do it the way you want. I'm
Yeah.
just reminding that we have a study session scheduled to go really in-depth with the priorities.
Great. I think if there may be questions or if anyone wants to drill down into anything, or if we want to ask the superintendent for more information about anything, I think this could be a good time to do so. Yes, Secretary Gonzalez.
Excuse me. Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent, I've been getting a number of calls and emails about the mental health. So I'd really like to make sure that we include that in our board priorities.
I absolutely agree. And I think maybe one of the things, because I think it was Board Member Noble at a previous meeting mentioned that we set the priority and then the superintendent and the team really drill down into like what that looks like. So maybe at our study session, we could talk a little bit about what prioritizing mental health in the budget looks like, if that looks like staffing, if that looks like programming, and how that plays out. So I would second that with that notion. Yeah.
Thank you, President Anderson. I would just like to add that I wonder if some of the information that might be shared on Tuesday around mental health, might include the things that the Office of Student Wellness is looking at, things that they, they're the experts in these kinds of programs and what's effective and impactful and actually meaningful. If there are things that they're looking for as far as funding that we can help support in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. Anything else from the board? Yes, Board Member Noble.
I completely agree with mental health, mental wellness. I think it is the single biggest issue facing schools and preschools, I can say, at every level. It's just so big right now. This is a really good list. Thank you, Superintendent. I agree that I also think we have to do something about attendance. And, with, again, having read a lot of national studies of what's happening, this is an almost universal problem. Something shifted in the pandemic, and how we sort of recalibrate attendance after that and talk about it as a community feels really important to me. I don't know how much, and this is really more for you, Superintendent, I don't know how much funding those efforts needs. There are three things here that are that are good, that are important. I think we might also, with some of these things, including, also district-wide community events, we might need to ask our community to step up for the schools, support attendance, and how that works. We do want to encourage people to keep their kids home if they're sick and contagious. We learned that in the pandemic, and so there is sort of a new level as to how that works, that honestly I think sharing information, understanding some best practices are sort of the work to be done around attendance. And having read some of the national studies and seen it in my child's school, there is this knock-on effect that when a bunch of kids are absent one day, the kids are more likely to be absent the next day, so it snowballs, and how we can stop the snowball sometimes if, as there has been in my child's school, some very legitimate reasons that kids are staying home, but then nobody comes to school the next day and the day after that, and again, the snowball effect. So, and I guess, I challenge myself to pick 3 here on this list, because if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So, having lumped attendance into one, even though that's a number of bullet points on the list here, and agreeing with mental health, I think I have to, I'm going to go with 4, but, I just think recruitment and retention of staff is everything. Everything flows from our people in the system, so that if we're not working on recruitment and retention of staff, I would argue we're going to slide backwards. And that feeds a lot of things, including continued improvement in HR and, I would say, special ed improvement. But ultimately, recruitment and retention of staff would be my 3rd. I do think we need to continue. It's related to mental wellness. Everyone sort of needs special education, it seems. And I think IEPs, again, is a national trend. There's more and more individual education plans, and that we need to have an emphasis on making sure that we are doing special ed as well as is humanly possible in this system.
Board Member Noble, you stole my priorities, and I'm very upset about it. No, those were exactly the things that I marked as well. I think attendance, and I might open that broader to family engagement, because I think that's where a lot, especially at the elementary level, the attendance issues are coming from. But also we saw when the students testified in front of LFC and said, these are the reasons that we're not coming to school. Even our secondary students were saying, it's for family reasons that we don't feel comfortable telling you about. So if they're not comfortable disclosing what those family reasons are, I think that means that there's something that we need to engage so that we can drill down and say, is it transportation? Is it caregiving? Is it substance abuse issues in the home? What's going on here? So I think I would push on family engagement as an effort to increase our attendance. Mental health, again, incredibly important. Recruitment and retention of staff, because that's driving our quality of instruction, which we are all concerned about our proficiency scores. Not a person up here is not concerned. Not a person in this room is not concerned about our proficiency scores. And the way that we get those up is through quality of instruction. And if we're not able to retain our staff or train our staff or recruit our staff, we're simply not going to have high enough quality of instruction. And then again, I also agree, special education improvements. We've seen through the pandemic that our needs have risen, and we're also getting better at identifying folks. I don't think it's that we're over-identifying. I think that we're getting better at identifying what's going on. And so I think investing money in that, rather than trying to claw back services that we're providing so that we stay within our budget, ensuring that we invest the money that we need to serve our students is a big priority for me.
And if I can just add a little bit to that topic around special ed, I think ancillary services speech and language pathologists, diags, those of that employee group is very important because, as Board Member Noble mentioned, in her professional line of work, she's seen more and more students who need IEPs or special ed services. We're seeing the same. And so when you see an increased number of special ed students, it means an increase of services that we need to provide.
One other thing, thank you for bringing up ancillary services because that just popped into my head, which is that it would be great if we could invest in bringing those services back in-house so that, it works so well with our security team. I think bringing the ancillary services of SLPs and OTs in-house will only benefit the district. So I don't know how much that has to do with the budget or how much that has to do with operations, but if there is something we can do in the budget to help support that, I think it would be great.
And I think that ties into Board Member Noble's initiative of recruitment and retention. We have to do a better job of recruiting these employees to Santa Fe Public Schools.
Yeah. Excellent.
Madam President.
Yes, Vice President Abeta.
A priority of mine would be a SFPS foundation. I mean, this evening we voted to accept land, for example, and so there's a lot of, I think, properties and resources and things that the public schools has access to, but because we're just our board and we do the day-to-day business, maybe a foundation would be able to take some of those initiatives on for us, and that way we can maximize and really take advantage of all the assets that the district has, and then use that to prioritize and fund some of these items that maybe the budget doesn't. So thank you.
And to that point, I think a foundation could provide the flexibility that the state doesn't allow.
I also think, I don't know how much this ties into a foundation, but a lot of my advocacy before I got onto the board, and something that has always been difficult for me, is the sort of difference in revenue that our parent-teacher associations generate school by school. So having a fund to level the playing field, so we're not dealing with a PTC budget of 500 versus a PTC budget of 100,000, I think a foundation could go a long way. I mean, that's what they do in lots of other places, utilize their foundations for. What would be helpful for me, I totally agree and support the idea of a foundation. What would be helpful for me would be to see what that looks like in terms of budgeting, like how we support that with the budget. So for the study session, that would be really helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, Board Member Noble.
On that point, I know we've looked into this and there's a lot to it. So really understanding what our existing foundation, Partners in Education, does, I think we've seen...
Or doesn't do.
I think we've seen some...
It's not part of our district. I mean, it's separate.
Right, as a foundation, I think would be to be advantageous. I don't know. I mean, if it would be, and so understanding costs, governance, and what the restrictions would be under or not, because there is a foundation structure that exists, and I know it provides a lot of valuable things, and maybe there's been a desire to sort of stay in that particular lane, but honestly, I don't want to duplicate structures if we don't need to.
And great comment, I think, on this potential priority. That could just be a study session by itself, right? Looking at governance, looking at the structure of it, whether or not it works within our budget, and so on and so forth.
Okay, great. Anything else? No? All right, great. So I think we have a lot to dig into in our study session, and thanks everyone for your input. Item B, audit update direction. Board Member Noble, no, you're fine. Board Member Noble. So we have our audit update direction on the agenda. I think this may be a mistake on my part because no, you want to go ahead with that? Great.
I mean, we can go ahead or not, but for the board discussion, I was able to attend the auditor's presentation at the spring budget workshop. Thank you, Superintendent, for enabling that. It was very helpful. And the expertise, the financial expertise in the auditor's office is clearly significant. Ultimately, and I think I don't have my notebook with me, but it is tied to one of our audit findings. My recommendation and request of the board would be that we direct the audit committee to work with the superintendent and team, ultimately to upgrade budget controls and updates on budget actuals and how that might look in. I really hope that it can be supportive of the superintendent and the finance team, but ultimately, getting some better lens and clarity on how we upgrade budget controls and have updates on actuals sort of mid-year through budgets is what I would suggest that the board direct the audit committee to dig into for really now and sort of the next fiscal year.
Yeah, I'll second that. Do we vote or just agree?
I think we should vote.
Okay, great.
So I'll go ahead and make a motion that we direct, that we ask the audit committee to work with the superintendent and team to update budget controls and provide better clarity on mid-year actuals for the district.
I'll second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or otherwise? Okay, great. Anything else on audit update? Okay.
We're meeting tomorrow, so
We're
it'll be
meeting
very
tomorrow.
timely.
Yes. We'll have news for the audit committee. Okay, great. So moving on to our CRC update, is there anything from our CRC members that we need to update?
President Anderson, I don't believe there's anything to update. The superintendent's raising his hand. We were supposed to have a meeting tonight, but we canceled that as there was no pressing business. We will get started on our facility master plan coming up here shortly.
Okay, great.
And may I add,
Yes.
Board President, CRC update, don't forget our ribbon cutting tomorrow at ECO.
Right.
4:30, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Beautiful building, and again, it ties right into some of these initiatives that we've talked about, and also re-engaging of students. So if the community could get out there, because again, without their support, it wouldn't be possible, and then if our board members are able to attend 4:30 at the current location, even though it's a new building, kind of.
I feel like we were just there breaking ground. This
And
is amazing.
The exact space we broke ground is where we'll have the press conference.
Excellent. Are you going to bring your shovel?
No, it's hanging on the wall.
All right. Excellent. All right. Anything else under board discussion and possible action? Yes, Board Member Bozay.
Thank you, President Anderson. I actually have two things. One is an issue that I think we're all aware of, the student a few weeks ago who was hit after school leaving Santa Fe High. And I think it's really important for us to discuss that as a board. There's some education, I think, that could happen to students and families about safe pickup and leaving of campus and using crosswalks. I don't know, what discussions should happen with the city if there need to be additional crosswalks. I know that as a parent of a student at Santa Fe High who drives down Yucca several times a week, there are signs that say, school zone, but not flashing lights like at other school zones. And so maybe that would help to remind folks. What happens, for those who aren't familiar, is that cars park on the right-hand side to pick up their students. And then in the next lane, cars are turning into the pickup line. And cars who have no affiliation just pass right by. And so a student came out, and this car was not going slow. They were driving 25 or 35, whatever the normal speed limit is, and the student, I believe, was on a scooter. And several people that I know saw the accident, and the student bounced right up. Somehow adrenaline got him off the ground, and he seems fairly unharmed, but must have been terrifying for everyone. And so I just would love for us to do everything that we can to help prevent that from happening again.
Superintendent, is that something we work with the city on?
Yeah, and I think that's something that, I know I've talked to many of you guys about this situation. We've done some advocacy work with our partners in law enforcement to address this, but any help or assistance we can get with addressing this concern with the city would be wonderful.
I drove down Yucca today. Yes, Board Member Noble. Oh, I was just going to say I drove down Yucca today to get here, so I do it often. And when students are getting out or coming in, there's a lot going on Siringo and on Yucca, and we should do all we can to make sure those students aren't harmed. Yes, Board Member Noble.
So I got a couple calls about this and people that saw it, and clearly it was traumatic for lots of folks out there. And I guess I'm really, really clear that we need to turn up the pressure on the city and ask them, safe routes to school is a thing at our metropolitan planning organization. This is an area where we are seeing crashes. I've been trained not to say accidents for whatever reason by the MPO folks. So I would suggest we maybe put it on a future agenda. If there is outreach, without guessing who it should be at the city, to the city manager to see if they want to come and be a part of a conversation or what. But ultimately, I think there are family members who are ready to raise their voices, and I don't know if anybody disagrees or anything, but ultimately, I think, streets and school zones are a city purview, so that we just need to make sure that there is a spotlight on this issue and this particular spot where obviously a child did get hurt regardless of how badly. Mm-hmm. And clearly we hope it wasn't bad.
I'll just say I also live on Siringo, or right off of Siringo, and the number of times someone has passed me on a 2-lane road is bonkers. Right outside of Santa Fe High, right outside of Nava, right outside of Lafarge. So talking about traffic enforcement, I think, is also really important, because it's a wild spot over there and kids can get hurt. So I think putting it on a future agenda makes sense, and maybe we can sort of I can talk maybe with the superintendent about what the best course of action is to put pressure on the city to ensure this gets taken care of. And I hope that those who are willing to speak up do speak up in public, for sure. All right, anything else under board discussion and possible action?
Yes.
Yes.
My second item, since we talked about it a little bit tonight, or since it was mentioned during the presentation regarding bus ridership being up, I'm wondering if this could be an opportunity for you and I to revisit our transportation resolution.
Yes, please, let's do it. We'll get a meeting on the calendar.
Cool.
All right, excellent.
Thank you.
Yes, Board Member Noble.
On that, I think that's great, and I'm very excited to hear. But just to say, I did hear, I've not verified, that the city canceled a bus route to the Santa Fe Community College. I don't know how that would fit, but as you all think about transportation, I do think that in the spirit of our dual credit partnership, that we need to make sure that our students can get to the community college if they need to.
Yeah, I actually was approached by one of the community college board members the other evening, and he mentioned he would love to work with us to get bus routes between the high schools and the community college, because he sees that as a continuing problem.
It is.
Yes. Board President. And I would ask you guys if you could really talk maybe to city councilors, whomever it may be. Don't forget, we worked hard and advocated with Senator Heinrich on being able to test in Spanish. I don't know if the city's taking advantage of that right now. And to your point, Board Member Noble, the canceled routes, maybe just like we did, they can go down the route of having individuals test in Spanish.
Sorry, I'm just making a note. Okay, anything else under board discussion and possible action? All right, we'll move on to advanced planning. So just one thing I wanted to note that's not on here first, that board member Noble mentioned that we do have an audit committee meeting tomorrow at noon. And then we will jump into our next meeting. We've sort of shifted the calendar a little bit here.
So sorry, we do still have an audit committee meeting. Just
We do
tomorrow.
still have an audit
Yes.
committee
Yeah,
tomorrow.
it's on my calendar.
Superintendent, did
Yes.
we shift our next meeting to the 24th?
I would like to make a proposal that
Yeah.
we move next week's meeting to May 2nd.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to be prepared to present to you guys a budget with all of the questions we still have to ask the state of New Mexico. So if you guys would approve, I would suggest May 2nd, the study session, to review the budget in depth.
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of that. And then we'll keep our 5/9 meeting.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And then just one last note on the advanced planning. Don't forget, May 4th is our golf tournament. And as you guys heard during that study session, the revenue that it generates really does fund all of our programs for staff and students that we cannot fund through our operational budget. We've done a great job. Our teams are full, and we continue to increase sponsorship. So
Excellent.
that's always an option, sponsorship. But if you guys have any connections for prizes, that's always the draw for teams to return the following year. So we're looking for additional prizes.
Would you be able to send us like something we could send to folks
Absolutely.
to sponsor? That would be really helpful. I can think of a few folks who might want to sign up. And then moving forward on our next meeting, we'll have because we're coming into graduation season, working on my speech as we speak. So we'll start having the graduations on the advanced planning calendar.
We will add
so
them.
We can all, okay, excellent. Anything else on advanced planning? All right. As long as no one else has anything else pressing that has been agenda'd, I will move for adjournment. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, staff.
Thank you, staff.